What's up, everybody? Welcome to another edition of the NFL Betting Show. It is wild card weekend here in the NFL. I think this is one of the best weekends of the year, this or divisional weekend next week, right? Because you get the games here, you get games on Saturday, on Sunday, and on Monday. We've got 6 games, but then next week, the number 1 seeds, the Detroit Lions and the Kansas City Chiefs, get into action as well. I'm your host, as usual, the spitting statistician, Dane Martinez. We got Sam Chowdhury in the building and the prop god. We are going to go game by game, giving you what we think, where we're leaning, how we are leveraging the best tools in the business. And I got to tell everybody right now, okay, if you are a fan of FTN, but you haven't made the subscription just yet, you haven't gone in, now you can dip your toe in the water. Our Stats Hub, which is the place where we get all of our deep stats, we apply them to get paid. It is free this weekend. You can go ahead and, kind of check out Stats Hub, which I completely recommend, and you'll be able to hear some of the ways that we use these stats. You can find them yourself, and you can go ahead and apply them and get some cash here on Wild Card Weekend. So let's get it popping. Our first game of the weekend, and quite frankly, I knew this was going to be the first game as soon as the matchups were set. The Houston Texans are always the first game of the playoffs when they are in. It is the Houston Texans. They are home dogs against the Los Angeles Chargers coming in. A very interesting matchup, in my opinion. We will start with you, prop. You think that the Chargers are coming in. They are not necessarily going to ride that run game where Harbaugh and Roman came on in. We thought that was going to be their identity, but let's not forget, they've got a phenom at quarterback in his mid-20s. Might as well leverage him as well, and you're tailing Justin Herbert.
Yes, indeed. I'm going to go with Justin Herbert over 1.5 passing touchdowns. You can get that plus 100 on FanDuel. I was actually surprised that this line is plus money with the matchup that we're getting. So if you look at Herbert, he's only over in 8 out of 17 games, so a little bit under 50%. But over the last 4 games, he's went over this number in 4 straight. I think the offense is crazy to say for somebody like with his skill set is opening up more for him. I think that we saw all season Harbaugh wanted to establish a run, but his running backs have been hurt with Dobbins and Gus Edwards, so he's had to rely on Herbert to get it done through the air. And now we're in playoff time, and I think that'll continue. Looking at this Texans defense, they've struggled through the air all season, giving up the 7th most receiving yards to opposing wide receiver groups. And then if you look at opposing quarterbacks, they're averaging 2 passing touchdowns per game against Houston, which is second to worst in the NFL. So I think I like Herbert to get it done through the air today. I'm sorry, I wish it was today, Saturday. And I thought about taking a 3+, but I didn't want to do too much, so we'll just stick with the 2 for this one. Over 1.5 passing TDs plus 100.
All right, fair enough. Now, listen, man, I know you love it and want the playoffs to be today. I will say this. We've got a stretch of 5 straight days of playoff football. There's the 3 over the weekend and Monday, but in college football right now, tonight we get it going in the semifinals with Notre Dame and Penn State. Then tomorrow, the Ohio State Buckeyes and the Texas Longhorns. We had our guy Walt Waddell join the SiriusXM show yesterday. He has been giving out plays on the show, and in the quarterfinals, my man went 5-1. The week before that, he went 4-1. So it doesn't matter what sport here. Over at FTN, we have got you covered. That's why you got to get down with us for the numbers. FTN Show is a great promo code to use to get a little bit of a discount for the fantasy player, the sports gambler in your life, if you want a little bit of extra cash in 2025. Prop, one of the things you said was that you think, that Harbaugh and the Chargers may try to establish the run. I actually believe the Houston Texans are going to try to establish the run in this one, and that's where my prop in this one comes. I'm going Joe Mixon over 70.5 rushing yards. Like I said, I think the Texans realize that passing is risking C.J. Stroud too much. That offensive line has been blunt guts trash. They've allowed a ton of pressure on C.J. Stroud. C.J. Stroud has had 214 pressures in the this season, which is by far the most in the NFL. He's been running for his life the entire time. And the Chargers come in with the 5th most sacks in the NFL at 45. So I think the plan is going to be punch them in the mouth, establish the run, and you can run on the Los Angeles Chargers. They give up 4.7 yards per carry. That's tied for 5th worst in the NFL. They stuff the running back only 16% of the time. That is the 6th worst in the NFL. And Prop, you know about that explosive run percentage, right? The Chargers are tied for 7th worst in the NFL, allowing 13% of the runs against them to go for 10 or more yards. I think they know that they can run a little bit against the Chargers. They will not be able to protect CJ Stroud, and I think they are going to try to establish the run. Remember, Stephon Diggs, gone. Tank Dell, gone. It's only going to be Nico Collins, but I think they're going to need to have Joe Mixon having a big game. And when Joe Mixon gets the volume, he delivers, okay? In 5 of the last 6 games, when he has had 15 or more attempts, he's gone over 100 yards. And there was a stretch in the middle of the season, you guys remember this, when Joe Mixon was absolutely torching defenses between week 6 and week 13. Like when he came back from the injury and when the Texans had their bye, he went for 100 yards or more in 6 of those 8 games. I go over to the tools at FTN. We actually project Joe Mixon to go for 84 yards in this game against the Chargers. That is over 70.5 rushing yards, and that represents a 13% edge on that prop. So I'm going over 70.5 rushing yards against the Chargers. You can get that one at -110 over at Bet365. All right, let's go to the Saturday night game, the Baltimore Ravens against the Pittsburgh Steelers. I got to tell you guys, I know that the Ravens look really good right now. I know that Pittsburgh does not look really good right now. But something tells me that this number is a little bit too much, at like 9.5, 10. I mean, we know about Tomlin as a dog. We know that outside of the last game they played, when Baltimore kind of put in work against Pittsburgh, these games have always been close. Lamar has not performed well against the Steelers historically, but we shall see. And in that last game when they played, I mean, yeah, Baltimore won running away, but their defense had a pick 6. Russell Wilson fumbled on the 1-yard line at one point. So I'm just saying, I may have a lean to the points, and I know my guy Prop loves him some Pittsburgh Steelers as well. But Prop, we'll go to you, not necessarily on the game, but George Pickens is a guy you have been riding all season long, and it looks like you're going back to the well again.
Yeah, I just think if you're going to bounce back at any point, it has to be now. Wait, am I muted? Am I good? Oh, I'm good.
You're good.
So I'm taking the 50+ receiving yards for Pickens. It's an all line. It's a little bit more juicy. It's -135, but I just think that the number is too low here. I'm not mad at the baseline for the 54.5 either. I think it's a bit of an overreaction. Now, it's kind of hard to say overreaction after what we just seen him do last week, but I feel like there's been a couple times this season where he's had to bounce back after. Well, even if he had a good game, he had to bounce back after. Not showing good composure, whether it's in the game or after the game, in interviews and things like that. So I think he has a matchup and opportunity here against this Baltimore secondary to get back in the good graces of Steeler fans. He's over the 50+ receiving yards in 10 out of 14 games. He's only missed it twice with Russell Wilson at quarterback. It was last week, which was just crazy to see. 1 catch for 0 yards, and then 48 yards against the Cleveland Browns. The last time he did see the Baltimore Ravens with Russell Wilson at quarterback in November, he had 89 yards. So I'm looking for some more like that. The Ravens secondary has played better over the last few weeks, but on the season, they're still giving up the 3rd most receiving yards to opposing wideouts. So I think that and Pickens is dominating the target share in Pittsburgh. So I think that'll continue. He's the best offensive playmaker. I would say him and Jaylen Warren for the offense. So I think he gets back on track this week. So I'll rock out with Pickens one last time.
We'll see about that. And then, listen, the number across most of the books, if you go on over to the prop shop at FTN, is 54.5, right? Mm-hmm. So paying have got another, 20 cents of juice, let's say, for those 4 yards, right? So we'll see about that. And like I said, Pittsburgh is like 9.5-point dog. So you would think the game script would be such that at some point Pittsburgh is going to have to throw. Remember also the Baltimore Ravens run defense is one of the best in the league, right? So if they shut down the run, it's going to have to be somehow else that Pittsburgh kind of competes and stays in this game or gets back into a game if Baltimore gets ahead like most people think. All right, let's go on over to Sunday. Sam, let's go to you. We got Buffalo and Denver in this one. Now, Buffalo, another one of these big favorites in Wild Card Weekend. Them and the Ravens are the 2 teams that are more than touchdown favorites. Last time I saw it was 8.5 for Buffalo Bills at home in Western New York. They're playing against a rookie quarterback in Bo Nix coming in. A lot of people think that Buffalo is going to kind of roll. But I have also heard some people that think that, hey, not so fast just yet. You are on somebody on the Denver side, and you're doubling down. You like a certain wide receiver in Denver, not only on their yards, but on their catches as well. Let's start with the yards.
Yeah, we sort of seen Marvin Mims sort of come on his own the last month of the season, I guess. I mean, dating back to last year, I mean, this guy could just never get on the field. It was always one excuse after another, like him and Jerry Jeudy playing the same position, so he can't get on the field. But recently, we have seen. At first, it was just him just getting a handful of gadget looks here and there, and he would still clear this 37.5 line pretty easily. He has 44 or more yards in 6 out of his last 7 games. He's averaging 62 yards during that span. But more recently, the last 3 games, he has over 30% snap share. He only hit that mark one time during the rest of the season. So he's still not a full-time player, but he is slowly starting to creep up there. I mean, before week 18, he had back-to-back games with 47% snap share, which were both season high marks. So I think just with the team sort of gearing up into playoff form, I think Marvin Mims is going to be a big part of their offense. And remember the beginning of the season, we saw that Josh Reynolds was supposed to be their quote-unquote wide receiver too. And I mean, after he got injured, he just never got back in the offense and then eventually got cut. But yeah, like I said, the 6 of the last 7 games during that span, he had a 13.2% target share, which isn't amazing, but it is second on the team behind only Courtland Sutton, and they're huge dogs. So we do expect Denver to be passing and playing from behind. And Bills, they're a pretty solid defense, but they are beatable by wide receiver 2. We have them 29th overall in DVOA against wide receiver 2s, and I guess I can just touch on the other prop and the receptions. I do like the receiving yards a little bit more just because he's a big play guy and he only needs 1 to 2 catches to hit that. But I think this reception line is good too. Overall, in the whole season, I mean, he hasn't been a good bet to catch 4 balls, but just more betting on the recent usage and expecting that snap share to go up. And the Bills surprisingly have a lot of receptions to wide receivers, 11th most in the league. And then going to our DVOA adjusted fantasy points against tool, wide receivers 2 on average see a plus 8% boost over their median production against Buffalo. So, like I said, he's starting to come on his own. He's getting integrated into the offense, and it is a pretty decent matchup, especially for wide receiver 2. So I'm going to double down on him here.
No, I like that. I also like the yards a little bit better than the number of catches because I've seen Bo Nix go over the top to Marvin Mims, kind of as the big play receiver, right? I'm reminded of, remember that like 4th down Chuck touchdown pass to tie up the Cincinnati Bengals a couple of weeks ago, right? So it does, I think, while Courtland Sutton obviously is the alpha on the outside, Mims is kind of that big play guy, and Mims is quick, man. He can take one and go to the house as well. But I like that. I think Mims has definitely become a bigger and bigger piece of the offense, to your point, since the beginning of the season. Prop, let's go back to you. In this game, you're doing something that I've seen you do all season long. You find running backs who are threats in the passing game, and you take their receiving yards. I remember you doing this with Aaron Jones a couple of times in Minnesota, and you're going back to the well with James Cook here in Buffalo in this game.
Yeah, and James Cook is someone who pretty much throughout the first half of the season, I was taking his first quarter receiving yards over 0.5 because it's plus money, and I'm sure it's going to be there again this week. And I'm probably going to take that too. But for the full game, we're going to go with James Cook over 8.5 receiving yards, which is one of the craziest lines I've seen. Now, I know he hasn't had a target in the last 2 weeks, but I think the game script will fit perfectly for this one because they're facing the Denver defense that has allowed the 5th fewest rushing yards to opposing running backs. And so I think Cook won't be as effective on the ground as he has been throughout the season. And I think that's when the passing game will come in more. He's over 8.5 receiving yards in 11 out of 16 games this season, averaging 16 yards a game. Look at the Broncos defense, right? Top 5 rush defense. But running back receiving, they're giving up the 4th most yards per game, 42 yards per game, pretty much 41.9 to receiving backs. And they're also giving up the 4th most receptions per game. His receptions are at 1.5 minus 115. I'm not mad at that either. I'm probably going to end up playing both, but my favorite look is going to be the receiving yards. Denver is also giving up the fourth most yards after the catch to opposing running backs, and the average long reception to running backs of 18.6. So it's just a smash spot for receiving backs, and it has been all season. So this 8.5 line, I definitely want to take advantage of that.
All right. Sounds good in that one. Listen, the next game up chronologically would be the Philadelphia Eagles and the Green Bay Packers. We don't have any official plays on that one. I think the biggest news to talk about real quick is the fact that Jalen Hurts did get through his practice yesterday. Remember, he's in that 5-step concussion protocol, and if he didn't have any kind of reoccurrence of symptoms or anything like that, he should be up and good to go. The Philadelphia Eagles also released Ian Book, who was their practice squad quarterback. So it looks like they believe that they're going to have Hurts, they'll have Pickett, they'll have McKee as their normal 3 quarterbacks. One thing I do believe, though, guys, I'd love to get your thoughts, is I don't think they're going to risk him as much, right? I don't know that he's going to run as much, and I wouldn't be surprised if, they don't, unless they really have to deep in the game, do the tush push. So for that reason, I'm looking at Saquon Barkley and his anytime touchdown. Now, the anytime touchdown is pretty juiced up, right? But you can get Barkley to score a first half touchdown, not the first touchdown in the game, but a touchdown in the first half at plus 160 at some places. And I think he will be scoring. I think he will be kind of the focus of the Philadelphia Eagles offense. And I think the Eagles are just in a good spot because the Packers are limping in. Jordan Love a little bit banged up. They won't have Christian Watson as well. But Prop, you were talking about also looking at Saquon Barkley in this game against Philly, correct? I mean, in this game against Green Bay.
Yes, and I like the touchdown look. It was a little bit better odds earlier in the week, but I mean he's been dominant against this Green Bay team, even when he's played for the Giants. Looking at his touchdowns to support you, first time we saw him 1 touchdown, the next time 2 touchdowns. Earlier in this season, 3 touchdowns. So it could be a multiple TD type of game. I got to lean towards the rushing and receiving yards. Because he had 132 in that first game. He's averaging 142 rushing and receiving yards this season. So I think the line is a little bit too low at 115.5. And
you like that better than the rushing? Because I think the rushing number itself is like 100, 101, something like that. And there's been games where he'll go for that, he'll get over the rushing and receiving number, just rushing. And sometimes he only does get like 1-2 catches, but you like the scrimmage yards combined better than just the 101 or whatever the case may be rushing.
Yeah, because if he could add in 40 receiving yards for us, sure. Like he had 23 yards against them the first time we saw him. You look at the Green Bay defense, they're middle of the pack as far as a rush defense, giving up the 13th most yards, but they're giving up the 5th most receiving yards to opposing running backs and the 7th most receptions per game to running backs. So that's why I like to get the combo in.
All right. Sam, let's go to you. The night game on Sunday, the Washington Commanders and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. This is the highest total on the board at 50.5. These teams played all the way back in week 1, Jayden Daniels' debut. I think things have changed for Jayden Daniels over the course of the last 4 weeks. The prohibitive favorite now for Rookie of the Year. You think, Sam, that, there's one of his targets that kind of flies under the radar in Washington that'll be able to support it against this Bucs pass defense that can be had, especially in a game where you think there's going to be some points?
Yeah, I'm super excited about this matchup. You mentioned, I was thinking about the same thing too. It's crazy to think about how far, I guess, both these teams have come since we saw them in the beginning of the season. I mean, both these teams just look like completely. I mean, I guess even their personnel is completely different. You remember back with Chris Godwin then. But, we've seen sort of coming out of the bye that Olamide Zaccheaus has sort of been the clear number 2 right behind Terry McLaurin. And that's coinciding with Noah Brown, obviously, going to the IR. So in 4 games without Noah Brown, he has 36 or more yards in all 4 games. Coming out of the bye, he's second on the team in target share and air yard share. It's at 16.6% target share, close to a 20% air yard share, again, only behind Terry McLaurin in both those categories. During that span, he's averaging 4.5 catches on 6.5 targets for 60.5 yards. So way over this number. And you talked about it too, this matchup. I mean, it is a team that we have seen get shredded through the air. They'll have the 5th most targets, 3rd most receptions, and 7th most receiving yards to opposing wide receiver. Going back to our fantasy points adjusted tool, wide receivers see a plus 6% boost in production against Tampa, which is the 7th highest rate in the league. So he's already been a lock to get this regardless of the matchup. We saw him have some ugly drops last week. And Tampa Bay, they haven't been a great secondary all season long, and they are still dealing with some injuries on their end. So again, he's just a safe guy to be the number 2 target. They are 3-point dogs, so we do expect them to sort of be playing from behind. But regardless, Tampa Bay, I mean, they've been shut down against the run. They can be had through the air. So I think it's a big game for Daniels through the air as well. So give me Zaccheaus here.
All right, fair enough. Now, listen, you're talking about Zaccheaus as the clear number 2 target. And while I don't disagree, and I agree with everything you're saying here, Sam, in terms of the Tampa Bay pass defense, right? I've got another nominee for who could be the second best pass catcher on Washington aside of Zaccheaus, and it's the tight end, Zach Ertz. And I think Zach Ertz is also in play here in this matchup on Sunday night. I'm going over kind of the same amount of yardage as you're talking about for Zaccheaus. The number for Ertz is 37.5. You said a lot of the things that I'm going to refer to as well, right? First of all, highest total on the board. I think there is production here on both sides. Tampa Bay, you talked about their pass defense. They've allowed 4,464 yards, third most in the NFL. But again, against tight ends even, you were talking about against the wide receiver too, against tight ends, they've been a sieve, guys. Tampa Bay allows 67.3 yards per game to the tight end position. That is second most in the NFL. And just listen to some of these guys that I do not think are as big as Zach Ertz in the pass game. I mean, in week 18, Juwan Johnson had 80 yards. In week 16, Ferguson over this number at 40 for Dallas. Stone Smart had 50 against this defense in week 15. They played the Raiders in week 14. Brock Bowers had 49 and Michael Mayer had 68. I can keep going. Tommy Tremble had 77 in week 13. George Kittle had 57 in week 10. Kelsey with 100. Kyle Pitts, who didn't do anything against anybody, had 91 yards in week 18 against this Tampa Bay defense, all right? And then Zach Ertz, last couple of games, has gone over this number. 5 for 44. That was on 5 targets. Then 6 for 72. That was on 7 targets over his last 2 games. He's had 6 or more targets in 6 of his last 8 games. So I think Zach Ertz is starting to get more and more involved as a pass catcher in this Washington offense, and the Tampa Bay defense gives it up to the tight end. You put all that together along with the general production we think is going to happen in this game. I'm going over 37.5 yards for Zach Ertz. But on the other side, you know, Sam, one of the things you said is kind of how the personnel has changed for some of these teams. And you mentioned Chris Godwin has changed. Now, we all know about McMillan on the outside. The rookie out of Washington has been great. But also in week 1, we did not know the kind of stud that Bucky Irving was going to be for these Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and I'm on his rushing yards total over on the Washington Commanders. The Commanders allow 4.8 yards a carry, third worst in the NFL. The explosive runs that we talk about all the time prop, they allow tied for 4th worst, 13.5% of the runs are explosive. Bucky Irving, we have a stat called the juke rate over in Stats Hub, which by the way is free for you guys right now. Bucky Irving's 5.3% juke rate is the best in the NFL among running backs. There's a couple of quarterbacks like Taysom Hill at tight end who's better, but among running backs, Bucky Irving's 5.3% juke rate is the best in the NFL. He has 88 or more rushing yards in 5 of his last 6 games. And you know, Washington has been giving it up. 150 to Saquon, 90 to Bijan. They gave up 72 to Rico Dowdle and another 37 to Deuce Vaughn in week 18. So this Washington run defense can be had. Over at FTN, we project Bucky Irving to go for 97 rushing yards. That is over the number of 84.5. That gives you a 10% edge on this prop. So those are the props that we have here, guys. But then also the last game of the night of the weekend on Monday night is going to be the Rams and the Vikings. If you remember, they played on a Thursday night football. The Rams won that game on Thursday night. That was when they thought Cooper Kupp was maybe going to get traded. That's when Sam Darnold had that face mask penalty that was not called. But I want to ask you this. Unfortunately, and prayers up to all the people in the Los Angeles area right now, as these wildfires absolutely burn through the city and has created so much devastation, so much so that, you know, there is an open question on if this game can be played in SoFi Stadium on Monday night. They're talking about Arizona potentially, talking about Vegas potentially. You know, usually a team gets 3 points for home field advantage, right? And this spread is only 2.5, 3. So these teams are kind of being booked as even on a neutral field. And what happens if this game moves to a neutral field? Does that change anything for you in this game? Sam, I'll start with you. You know, home field advantage is big. What do you think about this game? And what would change if all of a sudden this game is being played in Vegas or Arizona or something like that?
Yeah, well, you said it. I mean, the fact that it's already 1.5 to 2.5 point spread, assuming that it would be in LA. I mean, it pretty much says that on a neutral field that Minnesota should be the favorite team, which I'm not going to argue against. They very well could have been the number one seed in the NFC if they had one more win on their resume. So I think it is a pretty big deal. I'm not sure if it's going to change the outcome of the game. Obviously, if I was the Rams, I would feel a lot more comfortable playing at home. I'm not even saying that I'd pick the Vikings on a neutral field, but I think, like I said, it's a pretty big deal. I mean, there's a reason that you're playing all season long to win your division. You want to have home field advantage in the playoffs. So, I mean, honestly, I mean, there's nothing that they can do, but yeah, I mean, that was one of the more. There's been a lot of upsets throughout this season, but
Sure.
I know I was pretty shocked by that. I mean, I feel like that was just the turning point of the Rams season. Going into that game, there was rumors that Cooper Kupp's getting traded, Matthew Stafford's getting traded. For some reason, out of nowhere, Puka Nacua is just all of a sudden active. We have no idea what his playing time is going to be. Like, his receiving yards prop was like 20 and a half, 25 and a half. And I mean, he comes out and just balls out. He plays half the game, goes well over 100 yards. So it's kind of cool because that single moment pretty much changed the Rams' entire season. And then those two teams meet up again. And I mean, the Vikings were red hot coming into last Monday. They had that longest active win streak in the NFL. And then all for nothing, they still get in as a wild card. So we'll see. It's a game that I'm super excited about. So
Yeah, we'll see. I think it's important that you mention kind of where the Rams were going into that game, the trade rumors around Stafford and Cooper Kupp, and then it kind of did change for them. I also think it's interesting. I saw reports this week. Flores admitted that the Minnesota Vikings did not expect Puka Nacua to play in that game. They were sort of caught off guard a little bit by that one. And Puka Nacua went off. He had 7 catches for 106 yards in that one in week 8. His number is 88.5. He's gone over that number in 6 of his last 8. Nakua's been a beast. Nakua Matata, it means no worries. He's had 8 or more targets in his last 8 games. Prop, what do you think about this one, man, in terms of maybe the changing of the venue and anything that would be different from, say, that Thursday night football game in week 8?
Honestly speaking, I don't think the change of venue will have too much impact on this game because Los Angeles is not a football place. You know what I mean? I don't. When I think of the Chargers, I still think of San Diego. You know what I mean? You look at the Rams, it's the same thing. I think we see opposing teams because who doesn't want to go to LA, right? We see
of course, Mike Vegas is too, right?
Yeah, we're going to see opposing fan bases kind of take over that or get a close to an even split a lot, especially for a playoff game. So Minnesota fans do travel as well. So I don't think it will make too much of a difference for either team in this one. As far as the side, I don't know where I'm leaning yet. I do got a prop I'm leaning on. It's going to be Aaron Jones rushing and receiving at 79.5. I think that line is too low. It's minus 115 on Caesars. Okay. You look at the Rams defense against running backs, they've been a smash spot all season for taking the overs. They're giving up the 4th most rushing yards per game. And they are giving up the 20th most receiving yards. So it's a nice little combo. When he seen him earlier this season, he had 95 rushing plus receiving yards. I think that we saw Sam Darnold kind of I think that was probably the worst he looked all season.
Except for week 18 against Detroit.
That's what I'm talking about, last week.
Yeah.
The last game against Detroit, that was the worst he looked all season. So I like for the Vikings to lean on Jones a little bit and help Darnold out with some, quick passing game to Jones too. So I think he'll be able to touch the bar a lot, and I think the line is just too low.
All right, sounds good here. Go on over, by the way, guys, and get these props in, get these plays in when you can, because the numbers will move. I think the books are watching and listening to this show ourselves because they want to know where all the sharps are. By the way, hit like on this video, subscribe. This way you get alerts every time we go live. This way you get alerts every time you can win some money. I know the 3 of us will be back next week, first on Wednesday, doing the NBA betting show, giving you all the props, all the plays you need in the association. And then we'll be back next Thursday, same bat time, same bat channel here, looking at the divisional weekend where we really get the heavies in Detroit and Kansas City to come on in as well. But that'll do it for now here. For my guy Sam Chowdhury, for the prop god, I am merely the spitting statistician Dane Martinez telling you, go on in there, get those bets in. Your balance will thank you, and come on back next week. We'll see you then for another edition of the NFL Betting Show. We out of here. Peace.